Are you ready to dig into the latest reasoning models? What I want to do in this notebook is show you in a hands-on way how to take advantage of the latest reasoning models from OpenAI, from Anthropic, put them together with other tools like web search and a RAG agent to build your own research assistant. Now, what I'm doing here is giving you the code for how to do it, but there's also a lot of logic so you know how to think about these things and what are the trade-offs, what should you be considering in doing this. To get started with this notebook, you can run this right inside of Google Colab. However, we do want to take care of some other tools that we need. So one thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get API keys for some of the tools we're going to use in our research agents. I've got this set up for using contextual AI as a RAG agent. So this is where you have lots of documents you want to ask questions to that aren't public. And then I'm also using a Tvili client to be able to handle the web search. You can use different tools to do this, but if you're going to use the notebook as is, you can do that. For both of those, you can get started for free. Once you get your API keys, the first thing I like to do is just double check that my tools work. No sense in going way into the notebook, then finding out you didn't set up something right. So we'll run a little bit of checks to make sure our web search works. If you're using the contextual RAG agent, you're going to, of course, add your own agent ID for your RAG agent there. Make a request that makes sense here. I've made mine about financial data. Double check that that's all working because we need that working for the next section of this. Once we get the basics, let's go in and use the reasoning tools. Now, throughout this notebook, I've used the Agno framework simply because for these types of demonstrations, I can substitute in lots of different models very easily with the same type of code. When you're doing this in real life, you can always go to kind of raw Python. I have examples of building research assistants like this, or you can use frameworks. Just with frameworks, you got to be a little cautious because they can break when you get to production and with all the constant changes that happen. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to use an older Claude model to just illustrate how these models think. I'm going to ask it one direct question: who is the CEO of OpenAI? And you can see we're quickly able to get back kind of an answer for that. Now, this is what we call kind of a single hop question. Here I ask it, who developed GPT-4? We can see these models will hallucinate, they'll make up things when you just trust their own knowledge. This, for example, might have been trained before GPT-4 was released. I'm not sure exactly what's going on with it, but clearly you can see that just relying on the model itself, it can make a mistake. Now, these were examples of what we call single hop queries where I'm just asking for one piece of information. Now, sometimes what I want to do is what's called multihop. And when you start working with people doing research, they'll often ask multiple things in the same query. Like here I ask, who leads the company that developed GPT-4? If you think about it, right, there's two elements to this here. It's who developed GPT-4 and then who is the CEO of that. You need to pull both those together to be able to answer that. And these can be some of the challenging as you're building question and answer systems like that. And here's even a more complex one where now it's not just two things I need. I need to go find all the publicly traded companies, like filter down by which ones have a CEO that's female, look at the revenue growth, then also pull the Dell revenue growth from 2022 and compare all that stuff. And this is where a lot of these models will be just like, yeah, this is way too much for me. I'm not going to do that. But, right, like we want to be able to solve these kinds of questions. This is where the next generation of models will start helping with. So now what we're going to do is we're going to build a simple agent with reasoning. Now, the query I'm using is about getting some research on I'm working on building a hotel chain. I need to do a little bit of research around that. OpenAI had this in one of their demos. I used it. When you're working with these models, as we'll quickly look at the outputs, they get hard to follow, especially if it's not in a domain that you know about. So first thing I recommend is pick a query, something detailed and researchy, but something that you know about. So that way you have a basis for evaluating. Now, within the Agno framework, the first time I'm going to run this here, I just want to show you what happens if you don't use the reasoning that's in these models. You'll see we have a much shorter runtime, 30 seconds like that. And it will still give us an answer. These models love to be helpful and will give you an answer as well. So I'll get a long, detailed answer on these recommendations for where to put my hotel. But if you want a better answer, and this is where I want you to try it on your own, if you enable reasoning, what's going to happen is it's going to spend more time thinking about that. Just like how we talked about breaking up the query into subtasks and solving each of those tasks, that's exactly what these thinking projects are doing. Now, in this case, I can go in there. You can see the thinking, like what it's thinking to itself for how to evaluate these. In some of the more complex queries we'll show you later, you can see the actual steps that it's going through. And then we can take a look at the answer. And if you spend a little time, you'll see qualitatively that this answer is a bit better than the earlier answer where it wasn't using reasoning as well. Now, you can also do this with the OpenAI models as well. So here, for example, with o4-mini is a thinking model that allows you to do the same thing. In the notebook, I've stuck to the cheaper models. So both on the Anthropic and the OpenAI side, they have fancier models that will do more complex planning, but they cost a lot more. I don't want to run up your bill. The idea here is just to give you the intuition of this, like this. But again, like there's many model providers that have these thinking models, and Agno makes it nice for us to be able to kind of work across all of them like that. So the next thing I want to do is, we know that the model's knowledge themselves that they have is not enough for solving these kinds of things. We want to bring in external knowledge. So a couple of ways we can bring external knowledge. A common one for enterprises is using retrieval-augmented generation, or RAG, where we take all of our internal documents that we have, we chunk them up into pieces that we can then search, pull them into the context of a language model as well. And so I've used a RAG agent, a managed service from Contextual. I work at Contextual to do that here. I also want to use Tavili's search agent, web search, as well. Now for both of these, I want you to notice how I've taken the tooling here and just wrapped it inside of a simple function where I pass in the query of what I want it to search for, and then out comes the search result that I can pass into my LLM. You can define other tools in other ways. One of the things with Agno, as well as these models, they're very agnostic now to tools. So this is where you think about all the APIs that you have. Any place where you have sources of information that could be useful to these models, you should do that. So now let's keep going here. I want to show you kind of, I want to walk through kind of doing web search and using these tools with this. So what I'm going to do here is, Colab is grumpy at me, but hopefully we'll keep being able to run. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to tell it to use the tools when it's doing the query, right? I don't want it to use its own knowledge. And then under tools here, I've defined the reasoning tools, but then the two tools I have, the contextual tool and the search tool. That's all I have to do. This is where I like this framework. It simplifies the code down. You can do this in Python. It's not that hard as well, but this is just a little bit cleaner. Like, what should I wear tomorrow? These models are powerful. They can answer anything, right? So if I ask it what I should wear tomorrow, right away you can start seeing it starts thinking about it, but it says, wait a minute. The user asked what to wear tomorrow, but to get that information, we need location, weather, all that stuff. So yes, it has a powerful tool of web search, but it doesn't have enough information, and it knows it doesn't have enough information to use it. So now if I update that query and I say, hey, what should I wear tomorrow as an old man in Chicago? Now for the reasoning step, it goes, right? Like now it has a little bit of information that it can use with the location. And if we go through this, we'll see that, for example, it's able to forecast, hey, exactly what I should be able to wear tomorrow. And then based on that forecast, it's able to do an analysis and understand exactly what to wear. And so here it tells me what I should be wearing tomorrow when I'm going up to Chicago, like that. Another query I did was, hey, let's use the RAG search, which is in this case defined around financial documents, and I can use the reasoning model to help think through that. And so here we can see the different steps that go through where we're planning the financial analysis, right? We need to do some gathering. We need to gather additional data, all that analysis that's done. And you can see the individual queries. This is the nice thing about the framework is I can see the individual queries. Like here's the NVIDIA query I'm doing. Here's the contextual query I'm doing as well. And being able to pull all that in and be able to use that. And then with those steps now, I'm able to define a much better report. If I just tried to ask these questions themselves, I wouldn't have been able to get such a good analysis. And that's where thinking step by step through this, doing each of the steps and bringing it back gives you a lot better results like that. Okay, and again, like you can do this with OpenAI. I did the same query where all I've done is same code, but I just swapped in the o4-mini into this, and you will see it does a similar piece where it goes through this kind of reasoning steps as well through all of this, and then kind of does the tool calls to be able to figure all of that out in the same way. This is why I like these models. They're really simplifying lots of these queries that we have to do. Now, if you do one or a couple of these in the browser, that works great. But as you do more and more of these, you want to connect them to some observability type platform. So one of the tools I like to use is Langfuse. It's an open source observability platform that you can use. And what I've done here is I've added a little bit of the code snippets if you want to, for example, convert these thinking models that we have and be able to see them and work with them on Langfuse as well. So this has been a good tour. Hopefully it's been helpful for you to help give you a little bit of insight, give you some code to get started on working with these models as well. Thank you.